Welcome, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to conversations about transformation, the keys to lasting change. I just want to welcome you to this series, which is where we at NLP Marin have paired our master trainers with some of our graduates and really are looking into how they have incorporated transformational NLP into their lives and work and their unique perspectives on transformation and change and how to have that be lasting, which I think the entire world is extremely interested at the moment, at the moment. We're at the top of the year of 2022 when we all have our eye on what to change and hope that it will be lasting. If you don't know us at NLP Marin, we are the only place in the world to learn transformational NLP, which is a unique modality of healing and change. So our students come and as they go through the curriculum, they do their own personal growth work. They learn cutting edge skills and perspectives that they take back into their lives and their work and do some remarkable work in their fields. One such graduate is here today. I'll introduce Julie in just a moment. So I want to welcome you to today's conversation, which we have titled Unfurling. We borrowed that title from Julie's work. It's a beautiful one. And we're going to talk about moving through feeling blocked and unseen into abashed creative freedom and expression. So this is a conversation with Julie Gieseke. I got it right? Okay,
Perfect.
Good. Julie has 4 different hats that she wears: consultant or facilitator, speaker, MC, writer and performer, and coach and teacher. And I'll introduce you more in just a second. But we're also here with Buchheit, who is the co-founder of NLP Marin. I'm LiYana, and I'll be emceeing the conversation. I'm also a graduate of NLP Marin, and I also work in the marketing department here at NLP Marin. And I absolutely have also incorporated the tools of transformational NLP into my private practice, my parenting, my life, and definitely the work that I get to do with my alma mater. So more formally, let me share with you Julie. So Julie, I love when people write their bios in the first person, but I'm going to read it as though I'm Julie. So this is a bit of performance art here. So Julie, am a group process designer and creative thinker who designs experiences that get people out of their unusual ways of thinking. And the experiences that I design are sensitive to both introverts and extroverts and stimulate new ways of thinking and knowing one another. As a solo performance artist, I tell on myself with compassion, humor, and wisdom, revealing human vulnerabilities to grow connection and compassion between us. I model this approach, revealing the underbelly like extending an open hand, by willingly looking at my own faults, mistakes, and shortcomings. I coach people who are longing to feel more creatively free by helping them to express their truest selves, exploring the shadows we all have, looking into the dark, seeing what is there, bringing it into the light, and releasing it. And afterward, they move through the world with a greater sense of freedom and range of expression. I want that kind of creative liberation for others. Beautiful, Julie. Do you want to add anything?
That is.
No, that was great.
that was really, really great. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
For reading it back.
Whereas I don't know what's coming next, but I apparently live my life in the third person. So let's find out what happens.
Yes, exactly. I mean, given a second, I could probably, voice you, Carl, but you're on the spot.
No, don't.
No, don't do it. So here I'm introducing our Carl Buchheit, co-founder of NLP Marin. For over 40 years, Carl has practiced, taught, and extended the technology now known as transformational NLP. Carl trains from the heart, backed with a brilliant intellect, insatiable curiosity, and unconventional humor. The result is a fun-filled learning experience where all aspects of the students and their lives are welcomed and included. Carl has been involved in NLP since the mid-1970s. He is certainly one of the finest practitioners of NLP in the world and possibly the busiest. He challenges his students to explore themselves, the world, and life in a way that respects and uplifts everyone. His ongoing intense private practice with clients keeps what he presents fresh and alive. Great to have you both here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about unfurling, moving through feeling blocked and unseen into unabashed creative expression. Julie, let's start with a question I like starting with. So we'll turn the mic to you to share with us, what is your life and work like in general, but also as you've incorporated transformational NLP as you have?
That's a big question. That could be the whole.
Yeah.
I get asked that question quite a bit because a lot of the work that I do as an artist in terms of getting on stage and telling personal stories, often of things that I myself at some point thought, oh my God, I would never want anyone to know this. It is so extremely different from the version of myself in 2006 when I started NLP, and certainly all the years prior to that. But you know, I remember Carl telling me very specifically I had sort of like amazing ninja powers that I could literally be invisible in a room. And so even as I still very much am close to that version of me, the invisible, you know, it's with me every day. And she wouldn't have been able to imagine the version of me today that is willing to get on stage and or to write or to share or to speak from that place. So, and I feel grateful to have come into the fold of NLP Marin when I did. I consider it a significant part of the pieces that were at work for my transformation in order to do that. So it is very much a part of what enabled me to become more of myself. So it's not as if this ability or these interests and skills and were not always there. They were just very latent, very buried, you know, very furled. And so I went to NLP Marin mostly for my own personal transformation. I wasn't looking to become a practitioner, but I do use the elements of what I learned there. It's at the core of much of my thinking and working with groups and individuals. It informs so much of that work. So it's an internal and external presence for me.
Beautiful. Carl, when Julie and I were speaking before this conversation today, I told her that I also used to feel invisible, not only in a room, but it's a very strange thing to be a performer on stage while also trying to be invisible. So we had a little commiserating moment. Yes.
It makes it hard for the lighting tech, especially. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, well, what do you credit? And I know there's a long list them out or just zero in on one. What do you credit for being able to go from feeling or actually appearing invisible in a room to being creatively expressed in your life, but also on stage, also particularly for groups of people?
Well, I think for me, the whole ecology piece, the heart-based approach of NLP Marin, enabling me and anyone who is engaging with that modality to not have to throw away the parts of ourselves that we feel are holding us back. Like, so I would say, you know, prior to beginning that work, I felt a lot of shame about and stuckness and wanting to be more externally out in the world, but feeling unable to, and then feeling a lot of shame and humiliation about not being able to, like, oh, come on, I should just be able to do it. And that type of the holding holds it. And so the frame of NLP Marin in inviting in this opportunity to acknowledge and embrace and have gratitude, appreciation, and respect for that, and to bring that with me, and to know that it will always be with me, and how to hold it in that way, is what facilitated my being able to access all the other parts of myself that were sort of, repressed, bottled up, whatever you want to call it.
Pretty furled, perhaps.
Yes, very furled. Yeah.
Carl, would you share more about this huge, important word that Julie used, ecology, that is at the heart of certainly what transformational NLP is about, but also remarkable change. Can you just share a little bit more what that word means? Yeah.
Well, the use of that word in the context of one's individual learning and growing and changing, and also doing that in group or community, that goes right back to the two people who are most credited with founding neurolinguistic programming in the middle 70s, John Grinder, Richard Bandler. As far as I can tell, they were the first people to use this word ecology, which is attention to the effects, the side effects, the consequences of otherwise really wonderful learning or growth or change, but in the context of someone's whole life, or in the context of whatever the entity is. It could be a team of people in the workplace, it could be a family, it could be a group of friends. Anyway, they were the first ones to consider the side effects in the way that biologists had been doing since the early 60s. And as I was thinking about that, I noticed, well, it wasn't, there wasn't very much time in between Rachel Carlson's book, Silent Spring, where she was introducing the word ecology into popular attention. And it really didn't kick in hugely until the 90s, I don't think. But there wasn't very much time between her use of that term in a popular, book, not a scientific journal, and Bandler and Grinder using that in terms of change. So I'm going to kind of go sideways a little bit here, just lateral for a second. So I remember wonderfully Julie in class, and I don't think I ever heard her voice. And the manner in which I wasn't hearing her voice, something about it let me know that, oh my gosh, what an extraordinary person, right? I mean, the less Julie said out loud, the more intensely she was communicating something about herself. It was really marvelous. So I was just wondering, my goodness, what might be the consequences in Julie's life and world, and really everyone who knows her, if that started unfolding. And I'm sitting here right now just really pretty marvelously stunned. 2006 is a long time ago. 2007 is a long time ago. Oh my gosh. Yes, and I've been hearing about you for years and years and years and years and years, Julie. So, golly, well, whatever, I'll have whatever you're having, Julie, as the old saying goes, okay? The ecology of that seems to have been marvelous. And I haven't really responded in a very technical or, informational way to what LiYana asked. Do you want me to say more, LiYana, or are we okay?
Well, maybe just a hair more. You mentioned Silent Spring, and
Right.
Yeah, just maybe a teeny bit more about what that is. It's pretty powerful. That has us understand how important our environment or the conditions that surround us are.
Well, everything affects everything else, and it does it all the time. And it was mid-century at least in our culture, when scientists began to pay attention to the consequences of the interventions they were operating with in the environment. So they were spraying DDT to control various kinds of insect populations and other unpleasant things like fungi. And anyway, and then they all of a sudden started noticing, not all of a sudden, but gee, the bird population is really dropping off. So we have this really good result called farmers have a more abundant crop, but the birds aren't reproducing correctly. The birds are dying. And when that became, in all the years I've been paying attention to this, I've not discovered how that frame of ecology came into the original attention in the middle, 75, 76, 77, 78. It was, I think it might have had something to do with Gregory Bateson, but I don't know for sure. There is a question that came from that, really simple question that's extraordinary, that opens up extraordinary things sometimes. We are chatting with a student or a client about what it is that they would like to revise or change or update or experience in a different way. And once that becomes a comfortable conversation, then there's all kinds of wonderful things. There are all kinds of wonderful things that start unfolding. And then there's this question that we've learned to ask this way. Okay, cool, excellent. That's fantastic. And gee golly, is there anything you might lose that you value when you can have these really lovely evolutions and changes and unfurlings, shall we say? And almost every time the person's immediate response is, oh my gosh, no, I've wanted this all my life. Right? Well, part of the fact they've wanted it all their life and their life hasn't unfolded it yet indicates that there's something really important that needs to be noticed and respected and perhaps conserved, so that they can have the change, but without having to encounter the loss that everything about them has apparently been anticipating outside conscious attention, right? Every once in a while, we'll ask that question, is there anything you might lose that you value? And people do, they say, well, yeah, I guess now that I think about it, my family or my entire career, but not very often. But whatever is surfaced there, we don't stop, we just find a way to include what they continue to value as part of what they're now beginning to open up in a new way. So there's like, it's sort of like the phrase would be, everybody wins, nobody loses, all right? It's lots and lots of fun. We all have conceptions and ideas about what we will have to trade in exchange for greater well-being. And most of that's not really necessarily like that. And people learn a lot about themselves as they discover this stuff. They go, oh, well, I'm apparently more subtle and complex human than even I thought I was.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, thank you. So you said, so Julie, I want to catch the thread of what you were saying about it was holding the held places in tightly, that held them in place. And so I'm wondering if you can just share more about how you have reframed procrastination or not just going for it. So procrastination, resistance, the ways that we hold things tight so that there is forward movement, but not in a way that feels like a fight.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I still work with that feeling, but if I go back in time to about 2006, I remember I was considering going to graduate school, and I had a session with you, Carl, and I remember we did a sort of walking back from putting the application in the mailbox and what happens before that and what happens before that. And at that time, I mean, I was just struggling even with the idea, like, is it possible for me to complete an application? And I couldn't necessarily imagine what, that I would go to graduate school, that blah, 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 like all of that. I was stuck with, like, I'm not even going to be able to get this thing there. And I had this idea that I think a lot of people have, and I certainly hear a lot of my coaching clients sort of like, well, I just need to know what the path is so that then I can take it, which is useful if there's a clear path, but there usually isn't in most of the things that I've wanted to do in my life, right? There's a desire, a yearning, a movement towards something, but then a lot of fear and doubt around, like, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to, I should know how to, all of that stuff that stops me. And that sometimes I would label as procrastination. I think the difference between the version of me then that couldn't even, that thought that, oh, because I don't know how to either fill out the application or I don't have the things that they're asking me to have in the way that I think that I should have, is a sign that I shouldn't go further. That my doubt, my fear, my anxiety is an indication that I should stop. Whereas I feel like now I've come into a greater relationship with, oh, that's part of the process. Like, that's part of the experience. That's part of this, like, I'm going somewhere and I'm figuring it out along the way. And my uncertainty, my doubt, my questions aren't necessarily an indication that, oh, you shouldn't go here. It's part of the experience of trying to figure out what my path is. And I can never know on many of these journeys what the path is until I look back on the path that got me here. But I never could have known how to get there from wherever I was. And that's, I'm writing my first full-length visual memoir right now. And I struggle with that on a kind of regular basis. I don't know how to do this. Like, how many of this, that, how do these things come together? Am I going to do it? I can't at this point necessarily imagine what it will feel like to have that book completed, though I have some level of confidence that I probably will, because I have done other things in the past that I haven't known. But so I have a lot of similarities to that version of me in 2006 that went to see Carl about, trying to get myself out of this procrastination to fill out the application. I can relate to that a lot, but I have I've come to be in relationship to realize that doubt, fear, insecurity are also with me on the path. They're not signposts telling me that I'm going the wrong way. They're just with me.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's lovely. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I mean, that's pretty, it sounds easy as you describe it. And I can't imagine that has been so much of an easy process. Share, if you would, about changing the relationship, right? So you've sort of reframed them, and you talked about being in relationship with these doubts or fears or procrastinations. How did the relationship change? How would you characterize the relationship?
I mean, I think like all relationships, you don't just figure it out and then, okay, now we're going to get along great for the rest of our lives. I mean, they change. So, my fear, doubt, insecurities, at times will sometimes, have a stronger presence, or I might feel, they morph, they become more challenging than the challenges or fears that I had about filling out an application, 15 years ago. But I do think another key principle for me that I learned in, foundations right there at the start was the intended positive outcome and the wisdom of that, which there's a level of acceptance and acknowledging whether or not I understand what the intended positive outcome of this experience is, to trust that a little bit, that there isn't this voice from above or somewhere else that is telling me that I'm wrong or dumb or can't do it, or who are you to think whatever, fill in the blank. But that those fears, are like the very small parts of me that just, would respond better to some compassion and encouragement than to resentment and anger, like most people. So I guess in that sense, I mean, I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but I try to notice when I'm in that space of like, oh, come on, Julie, figure it out. Like, it's already, January 14th, and you thought you would have so many blah, blah, blah pages by now. And, that kind of holding, that's a very old familiar. And so can I have compassion for that part of me that feels the need that the only way we're going to get there is by being angry and resentful? There's a part of me that can I like have compassion for that part of me that feels that that's the best and only way to get anything done.
Well said. Carl, will you share a bit more about this wonderful life-saving term, the intended positive outcome of something, or that aspect of ourselves have a positive intention for us? No exceptions, even if it doesn't seem like it at first.
Well, it's a basic presupposition, and it's so useful. It's one of the ones that's most joyful to watch people argue with when it's first introduced, that all experience is sourced out of some kind of intended positive outcome. And I mean, all one has to do is say that sentence to a group of humans, and for really understandable reasons, they immediately go, no, hold on. I mean, life is replete with situations that would say, no, that can't possibly be true. But at its more like cosmic level, we kind of presuppose that everything is sourced out of some kind of intended positive outcome for something somewhere, by something somewhere, about someone somewhere. But when we get down to our individual experience, we're still insisting that that holds. And after a while, if you kind of just marinate or splash around in that presupposition for a while, it is really liberating and it's really relieving. It suggests that something very wise in us knows what the heck it's doing, even when we have no idea what we're doing, which is much of the time for almost all of us. And there's a question we can ask. If someone describes something that's most difficult or most stopped or most frustrating or most painful, shameful, humiliating, embarrassing, guilt producing, whatever, all of these things, we can take a breath and say, what good thing comes to someone who's having that experience? This is also a really crazy sounding question. What do you mean, what good thing comes? It's terrible. We understand it's terrible. What good thing comes? And there are no pat answers. There are no expected responses. In fact, very often there's no answer needed at all. What's useful is asking or hearing the question, what good thing comes? So no matter how much trouble we're in with ourselves or anything else, we do start from this place of something something positive is trying to unfold itself here somehow for someone. Let's see if we can notice what that is respect what we've been up to, even when it's gotten all kinds of terrible sideways on us, sort it out a little bit, and allow that intended positive to fulfill itself, or respect it and let it continue to be part of something larger or newer or bigger that we're moving on to. By the way, we abbreviate intended. I mean, the presupposition is all experience is sourced out of some kind of intended positive outcome. I think the original NLP version of it is something like all experience has a positive intention or something, but the wording intended positive outcome occurred to me one day early on, and then right after that, the abbreviation of that into an acronym, IPO. Yes, and I do understand there are people in the world who think that that means other things, but we're always wondering, golly, here is this really difficult thing the person is experiencing or I'm experiencing. What are the IPOs of this situation? And it's a way to get oneself on one's own side about something if one has to pick a side, really smoothly and easily. It's really useful, it's really sweet, it's really fun. And after a while, it becomes a natural part of making sense out of the world.
Thank you. Well said. So, Julie, we haven't scratched the surface about what you're creating in terms of as a performing artist, but let's also just, we can circle back and let's continue, but I also want to talk about some of the strategic work you do and team building. And there's a nice set of 4 questions that we learn in gosh, maybe even the first day, or certainly the first couple of classes, right? And you were mentioning how it's really become the basis of a lot of strategic planning. And so I just wondered if you would share some more about that, and we can talk about the 4 magical questions as we go as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it so happened that the work that I ended up doing a lot of is around strategic planning and strategic visioning. And after going through the program, and who knows the mysteries of why, how that came to be, whether or not that was something that resonated with me, because I think prior to going through that program, I had never really ever thought about what I wanted or had the experience of setting a goal or saying I wanted something and then having it come to be. That was just, I was sort of living in a life of sort of life just sort of comes at me and I respond to whatever is there. So strategic planning, strategic visioning is obviously something that has been happening for a long time in business context and in coaching as well. And I think that the idea of first of figuring out what one wants, what will having that do for them, sort of like what, so often those first responses to the questions, particularly in a business context, are often around, more, right? More money, more clients, more whatever the thing is. And then work sometimes starts to go around, then how do we make that happen? And there isn't often much reflection to think about some of these other things that we've already touched upon, like what would we lose that we value if we pursue more? And how will we know when we have it? So I find that whether or not, I don't know that those questions necessarily for me are asked in a business context in that as explicitly, but is certainly part of what I would build into important consideration for a group or an organization to reflect on. So it's part of what I think is important and what I believe to be necessary in order to be able to fully actualize those things in a sustainable way. So I don't know, that my answer feels a little meta and vague. So feel free to poke at me to get more specific about that.
That's great. Well, these are really, I mean, they're significant questions. And I don't know, Carl, do you want to share the sequence of 4 questions? We call them the outcome frame questions. And Julie, we can then circle back and talk about these innocent little questions that open up so much.
They are innocent little questions. And they are evolved from some of the very first NLP that was pulled together, created in the 70s. They're extraordinarily useful. We'll start off with what was, if I were the practitioner speaking to the client, what would you like? Which is, right? And the second one, and what will having that do for you? That's where it really starts to get interesting, because most people, when they first encounter that question, they think, whoa, what a great question. And we kind of go, well, yeah, we're very fond of it. And there's often a response to that. And then we say, fabulous, wonderful. And what will having that do for you? And maybe a third time, maybe 20 times, but usually not. Usually not. And what will having that do for you? So what the person is unfolding is a sense of their values, their criteria, the things that are important to them and precious to them. And they're introducing themselves to their present tense self, to a future self that maybe they've never had the opportunity to speak about or even think about. And then somewhere along in there is this question that Julie just mentioned: how will you know when you have it? Which is like really surprising, especially if we're talking about things that are sort of like abstractions, like I want fulfillment and joy and happiness. Well, how will you know when you have it? And then sometimes there's a bit of a more specific inquiry. Gee golly, where, when, and with whom would you like to have this experience? And if the answer is always and everywhere with everyone, then we definitely have to pay some attention to say, everywhere with everyone? Well, I guess no, not really. And that leads on to that, actually a 5th question, which is the one about ecology. Is there anything that you might lose that you value when you can have this really wonderful outcome now? So those are 5 questions. We introduced the 5 questions. Excuse me. When people are first introduced to them, as they're practicing them with each other, they ask the 5 questions and they say, well, I guess I've succeeded at that. I asked all 5 questions. These 5 questions can become the basis for a 2 or 3 hour long interaction and conversation. They go in many different directions, but they're the basic kind of wireframe for whatever the person wants to create. So that's what I have to say about that.
The thing that can I add on to what I love about the what will having that do for you, that sort of drills down beyond the first answer, which is I often think of as sort of like the brain's solution, like, well, I want a new car, and the brain, once it comes with an idea, will often stop there, and then we go about the work of what we need to do to get a new car, and then we get the new car, and yet we might still have whatever the feeling is that the experience that we wanted to have that hadn't been identified, that perhaps on some level was assumed would be had with the new vehicle. And what I like about what will having that do for you is it's an inquiry, a curiosity generating question that forces the brain to go beyond its first, well, here's how we solve the problem solution, that I think is really useful and surprising. And it often leads to answers that have multiple paths, that that to an experience that might be had by a new car or a walk outside or a, eating fresh vegetables, who knows what, right? But there's multiple paths to the experience that we ultimately want to have, versus sometimes where we start off with our first solution thinking, well, if I made more money or if I had a new relationship, that's what I need in order to feel better. So I really appreciate that part of the beginning of the outcome frame.
It's really a fun thing to pay attention to. Yeah. And it goes into really surprising directions. So the person, after a little while in conversation about that, realizes that what they really, 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 really want isn't what they thought they wanted, which is often part of why they haven't unfolded what they want yet, because it's not actually what they really want. It's identified as a, I'll do this or be this, and then that will lead to that, and then that will lead to that, and that will lead to that, and then I'll have this, and this is what they really value. And they're actually not that interested in all of this process before that. So just in case there's another way to let a cooperative universe unfold this in their experience, then we can maybe skip these parts over here. Although you do have to kind of take a shower and show up for a lot of things. There's no question about that still.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Julie, is there anything else to add about moving through or transforming creative blocks? I mean, it's a really beautiful journey that you're sharing with us, of the necessity of being and feeling invisible in a room, to like working with groups of people and really having them connect and sharing the underbelly of life with an open hand, I think is that the way you put it so beautifully. What a transformation. So anything else you would want to share about the blocks and moving through them or transforming them?
I think I would just reiterate that, and I've been saying this to myself more than anyone else, is that it's a continual process for me. There isn't a point of being liberated. I think liberation is a continual process, or, sort of like what happens after enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. Like you still have to get up and take a shower and show up for things. That there isn't, and that while the version of me today is experiencing a greater access to my creative expression, I still work with the constraints and constrictions, and just on a different level. So I am, as somebody who didn't want to even, sit in front of the room in class. I know, like, often those opportunities to come sit on the chair next to Carl, like people's hands would shoot up, and because it's a great opportunity, but I was far too, afraid to take that opportunity, and then to be in what many people will often come up to me afterwards, after having seen me perform, and say, "Oh my God, you're so brave! It's so brave!" And I understand the tendency, because I probably would be projecting that onto somebody, like, "Oh, they have some sort of quality or an ability to do that, and I don't." But I know, the thing is that I know, because I am that person still, and and that person still shows up in me, and still has feeling of dread about going onto stage, or in all of these ways. And so it's just important for me, and I think that people understand that I'm not just some woo, it's all just flowing so easily for me now, it's no big deal, I just get up there and do that thing. It's like, no, I still have to, crawl my way through some of that stuff. Except that I know more now that, as I said earlier, that that's part of the experience for me. And so I can hopefully acknowledge that and bring that with me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
It's actually we spend a lot of time going like that. Actually, and we just yes, we have group exercises.
The equivalent of crawling through the mud or something.
Yeah.
Julie, I don't know if this is exactly what you're speaking to, but there's, and Carl, you can maybe put more precise language to this, but there's a way that you may have shifted things so that the creative expression feels better than kind of staying unseen. Would you say that somehow you've done some inner work so that too much of you, it feels better to kind of go through that, even though there's some crawling through the mud?
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what's interesting to me about, so that the word unfurl resonated with me. I was in Ireland, and in Dublin, all the museums are mostly free, which is a great idea. So you can just sort of wander in and look at some things. You don't feel like I have to see everything because I paid $25. And there was some etching. It was a very old etching of some men on a mast. And in the description, it said something about that they were furling the sail. And I had never thought about, I was very, unfurl. I was like, oh, you have to furl before you can unfurl. And that that is necessary in order to have this, and then that again, and this. And so I just was really struck by, I think it speaks to, again, what I said earlier about having gratitude, appreciation, and respect for this part of ourselves. But it's all of that holding, and the fear, the doubt that is in part fuel for the expression of, and that it's a yin and yang that I believe for myself that that's in order for me to be able to tell the stories that I tell, or the way that I tell it, or, I mean, and it, you hear this all the time, like, what comedian is a happy, unobstructed person? They often have quite torturous personal life experiences, like most of us, but it's part of, like, I just don't think you come out of the womb with great one-liners, and having had a blissful, wonderful time on the planet up until that point. So I'm interested in that, and the idea of furling and unfurling, to me, I think gives respect for whether it's an internal or external experiences that are part of that furling, but you can't unfurl without having been furled.
Carl, it feels like you've got some things to say about furling and unfurling.
No, I don't have anything to say out loud. I'm like recomputing everything. So I'll just hear quietly and reevaluate all of life. Based on what Julie has just shared. Wow.
Yeah, beautiful, Julie. Well, let me ask you two last questions. This one's for Julie, which is, anything else you want to say to Carl, to NLP Marin, to transformational NLP?
I would say that the language that I use when I talk about, people ask me, because, I waited tables for 25 years and was very stuck. And I do very different kind of work right now. And I always get that when people hear that, they're like, wow, tell me about that. People are very interested in this. What happened? What was the shift? And I would say that my experience in working with Carl and going through that program for the 18-month was a major star in the constellation of my personal transformation story. I also was blessed to have a really excellent therapist and a couple of other people in my life, mentors, teachers, but absolutely NLP. As I said, I signed up for that mostly because I was interested in my own transformation, and it was so remarkable to me that how transparent the process was. Right, like we would get a script basically of an exercise and go off into breakouts, and we all had the same piece of paper, and I would go through the thing with my partner. And so we all knew what was up. It wasn't this mysterious thing that you had to have this secret bag of tricks and still the change would happen, and that shifts would happen even with somebody who is just reading off of a sheet of paper that we've both been given, and which I think is remarkable. And so as I said, it informs my personal growth and my work with individuals and groups on a regular basis. And I feel so grateful to have had the opportunity to be able to attend those workshops, and also to the one-on-one work that I've done with Carl as well. So I don't know that only because this phrase doesn't work for me in general. Like I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for, maybe something else would have happened, who knows, but this happens to be the path that was for me. And it was definitely a major contribution to unlock a lot of the very stuck places that I was in I started that program in my mid 40s, maybe early 40s. I'm 55 now. So it was a good solid lifetime of so thank you for chipping away at that with me.
I think we probably did a little chipping. We did some spritzing. We did a number of things. Yes.
Wonderful. So last question for you both, which is if you could leave our audience with one thing about change, transformation, or perhaps unfurling, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. Let's have Julie go first, because I'm really thinking.
Well, I often say to my coaching clients that change is simple but not easy, because it requires that one be able to hold the desired state and honor the present state, and those two things are usually in contrast with one another. So it's a back and forth between those two. And so in regards to this conversation, I think the layer that I would add to that is a sort of like, again, the furling, takes some work. Those in that etched image, those men were like dangling from some tall mast, and dealing, I'm assuming, with some sort of very heavy weighted material. And so furling takes some work in order to have the unfurl. And so I'm just reminding myself too that, again, as I'm like on my most current creative project, doing something I've never done before, to remind myself that, because I'm struggling with some parts is not an indication that I'm not on the right path or doing it. that's part of it, and that just because I've am more creatively expressed than I was 10 years ago doesn't mean that I now can just sit down and things are going to flow out of me without any challenge. So it's kind of that for work release.
And those sailors were no doubt standing there on their feet, soles of their feet, naked feet, were standing on a rope in a high wind with this going on, and they were focused, shall we say, but they knew how to work the system.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Carl, any last little thing pop up for you?
Oh, another of the things we presuppose, which is about humans, which is with very narrow and few exceptions, maybe no exceptions at all. Every one of us has within us the resources to call upon, to be and do and have and experience the way we want. The difficulty is noticing that they're there, because often we've been taught they're not there, or they've been stealthed out so that they could continue to survive in an environment where maybe they weren't that welcome. So there's that difficulty. Maybe we don't know they're there, or we have difficulty accessing them. There's not a way to actually get to them. And so change is very often about noticing what we really have and finishing the job of giving ourselves access to what we've always contained, so that actually that will expand out and attract more of itself. Like attracts like, as they say.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank
A
you.
treat. Yeah, what a
Thank
treat.
you,
I mean,
Julie.
goodness,
Thank you, Julie and LiYana.
Yeah,
What a
thank
treat.
you both.
What a treat. Okay.
Yeah, thank you both.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
So real quick, there you can learn more about Julie and more about Carl. There'll be links below this video or audio. And yeah, thank you both for having this conversation and being involved in this work for many, many decades, and Julie almost 2. So again, thank you both for the conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.